Okay, I have a question about caffeine.
Yes.
Because I like to have my ketone IQ with espresso. I have my espresso in the morning. I like to take my ketone IQ on leg day because I find for whatever reason, I feel like Wonder Woman in the gym. The weights are not as heavy. I have more endurance. I can do the same weight that I've done every other week if I'm not, taking ketone supplementation, and I feel like my workouts are augmented. And when I have espresso in the morning, in addition to the ketones, man, I'm flying. So my question for you is if you understand or if there is any synergistic effects when we combine caffeine with ketones, and if so, what are they? And then maybe we can talk a little bit about performance. There's sort of a natural thing that we can talk about performance in the gym from there.
Sure, sounds good. I don't know if you know, we've just launched our Ketone IQ caffeine product, peach flavored.
Oh, I did not know that. No.
Yes, I love the taste. I can't drink it too often because my body can't tolerate caffeine too much. So if I drink 2 shots like 2 days in a row, like 1 shot per day, 2 days in a row, I'll get a headache from the second day.
I'm a fast metabolizer of caffeine. I could have coffee at 11 at night and I have no problem.
A lot of my American friends are. Like, you guys just grow up with caffeine. I'm like
they put it in our bottles.
6 cups of like Starbucks coffee per day. I would die.
Well, have you seen the venti size? I don't know if you've seen like the large size coffees that they have at a place like,
I can't. I get really bad headaches. I can't concentrate. But onto the mechanism of it. So what does caffeine do? Caffeine is essentially a adenosine receptor blocker, right? So it blocks that receptor so that you don't feel fatigue. But it also has a half-life, which means after X amount of time, it falls off and then you crash and then you feel fatigue again. It does increase heart rate. It increases blood pressure, right? So you feel that adrenaline, almost like an adrenaline rush without actually increasing adrenaline. Actually, I don't know. It might slightly, but I know that it does increase heart rate and blood pressure.
Well, it definitely increases dopamine. Like it definitely increases baseline dopamine, like 1.5 to 2 times from baseline if you consume it.
Right. Yeah. And so you are now in this energetic state where you're productive. However, caffeine does not provide you with the energy. You still need to pull the source of energy. All this fuel, this increased heart rate, increased metabolism, increased metabolic rate, increased brain demand of energy. You still need to pull in energy from within your body, whether it's glycogen stores, whether it's, your food. You still need to provide that. Ketones, on the other hand, is not a stimulant. That's why a lot of people can take it before bed, or people replace their afternoon coffee with ketones because then they realize it doesn't affect their sleep pattern as much as they would if they had coffee after lunch or late evening. Ketones directly enters your brain and provides your brain with the substrate that you need when you are already having increased brain metabolism with the caffeine. I think that's where the synergistic effect comes in. There is a study by Mujika Parody on effect of ketones on brain network stabilization. So they term it brain network stability as the interaction between brain regions. When they put young adults on keto diet for a week or just 1 dose of exogenous ketones, the interaction between brain regions increased, and therefore there's an increase in brain network stability. And they say as we age, this brain network stability decreases as we age, and therefore increases risk of neurodegenerative diseases. And with that in mind, I would think ketones on itself, it already increases cognitive function. And in our $6 million military study, we saw an increase in memory recall, significant increase in memory recall for long-term memory recall, not short-term. Also an increase in reaction time. So we looked at shoot simulator, how fast they react to shoot targets. And so we know that there is a positive effect on the brain in and of itself. Now, when you couple it with caffeine, which also increases the brain activity and cognitive function, and now you're providing the fuel to it, that's where it becomes synergistic.
That's really cool. And the other thing I was thinking of as you were talking, is the other thing that it does is it increases cortisol, which is going to keep more blood glucose around, for uptake from whatever cell. So now the brain and or your muscles and or your organs have both the ketones, which are being taken up from the MCT transporter, and potentially as well glucose is being either insulin independent or dependent in the myocyte, like going up into the muscle cell.
Exactly. And
that way
hopefully,
as well.
hopefully the presence of the ketone would also cushion that crash that you would normally get from
Yes.
caffeine as well. So usually what I like to do instead of always I'll alternate between the caffeine ketone IQ peach and just the pure ketone with green tea, because then I can take more of the ketones and then I'll have the green tea instead of the caffeine.
The coffee. Awesome. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about performance. As I mentioned, I always try to take it for leg day. It's by far the most punishing workout that I have in the week, and I definitely feel like I'm not sure if it's my strength is increased or my ability to recruit the motor unit is augmented, or it's just the weight feels like my perception of the weight is, I don't know which one it is, but I do feel, or maybe my cardiovascular endurance, like leg day is also a big cardio workout, right? Like sure. I'm usually soaked by the end of leg day. So I wonder, and maybe you can explain a little bit to the audience and to me as well, what are some of the mechanisms in terms of the performing enhancing effects that it may have on strength, on endurance? Is it an analgesic? Like what is happening?
I'm so glad you brought up the word analgesic, because when we ran a study on anaerobic exercise, we saw the RER, which is the respiratory exchange ratio, that shows whether your body is metabolizing more glucose or more fat. We did see that when they are on ketones, when they're on ketone IQ, it pushes the metabolism towards fat a little bit more, but they perform better in anaerobic, which doesn't make sense, because physiologically, what we learn in metabolism is that when you're doing anaerobic exercise, you will want to prioritize glycolysis. You will want to prioritize glucose, because that is the fastest form of ATP generation. But we saw an increase in performance, in power output, and also lower fatigue levels with ketones. So what we are thinking, it could be the analgesic effect that is similar to caffeine. So caffeine has an analgesic effect as well when you do anaerobic exercise, because that localized burn on your muscle when you're having this high intensity workout, it's the perception the perception of pain is decreased with ketones. Now that is as of right now it's pure hypothesis until we can actually tell. We don't know for sure. But on the other hand, there are other aspects that has been proven, which would be more on the cardiovascular side, because you're right, endurance-wise, it has been shown to improve endurance, because there are specific studies that looked at specific organs, such as the heart and the brain, both of which would take up ketones preferentially, independent of other substrates. So, for example, the heart has been shown to take up ketones whenever it's available, proportional to the availability, regardless of the intake rates of other substrates. So it doesn't decrease glucose or fat intake. It just soaks up the ketones whenever they are there. So just providing more source of fuel to these organs itself. Another study that has been a while now, 4 years ago, has been shown that ketones also has a glycogen sparing effect. So it spares your glycogen when endurance athletes, when they're doing a race, when they're running. It has been shown that ketones would retain their glycogen stores a little bit longer, a little bit more compared to those who are not on ketones. And then obviously there is the cognitive benefit, which is the perception, like you said, the perception of the weight, or like you're just being in the zone. So how I feel, I would normally describe it, because I'm not an endurance athlete. I'm not an endurance person. Like I do my cardio, but nowhere as long as a lot of these athletes that we work with. But
Michael, who's I think one of the co-founders of H2N, I always see him on Instagram. He's like, I ran 4 million miles. Look at my little lap around California that I just did this morning.
Exactly. And that's why I told my head of social media, I said, these days the cardio zone 2 walk is plateauing. My results are plateauing. My cardiovascular fitness has increased, which I should be happy about. But what I'm not happy about is that I need to now increase intensity. So I started running, and I said to him, do not tell Michael I'm running, because he will think when I say I'm running. When I say I'm running for normal people. When he hears I'm running, he'll think like, oh, okay, you can do 6 miles in 10 minutes.
All right. Yeah, right.
So what I do is mainly like weightlifting, right? So how I describe the effect of ketone IQ when I weightlift is that it gets me in the zone. So I can focus very well, especially, on leg day, you want to have almost perfect form. I think the form itself is very, very important. One, it avoids injury. But secondly, it really helps you with your lift, right? So when you use the right biomechanics, you are lifting it the right way and you're lifting the right weights. So I think that helped me in terms of like using it as a pre-workout. Most importantly, though, a lot more studies are coming out now that ketones are even more powerful when used for recovery. So after workout, because a lot of people, so when we first sort of sold it out to athletes, we asked them to do pre-workout sort of acutely, because as you know, you can feel the difference. I think a lot of people, when they feel the subjective difference, they know that the product works, because a lot of supplements out there these days, it's, you take it every day and you don't really see the difference. You just hope that, it'll show up in your biomarkers 6 months later. But Ketone IQ, when you take it acutely, you feel the cognitive difference. Mm-hmm. But the studies show that the compounding effect of recovery is even more powerful, albeit you don't really feel it subjectively, but if you measure it week after week, you will see the difference. Or even if you can measure your sleep quality, your recovery score, a lot of our athletes, they measure them and they were very surprised the significant improvement that they've found.
I would be interested to see, so in terms of a post-workout, nutrition, let's say, is it augmenting muscle protein synthesis in any way?
Yes.
You mentioned it has a glycogen sparing effect. So is that also helping? Like we know after a workout like leg day, you're supposed to consume, carbohydrates and proteins. But I wonder if ketones are acting like a signaling molecule in a way.
It is.
Yes. Okay.
Absolutely. You just pointed out all the points that I wanted to say, basically.
Okay, let's talk about it.
So when you take ketones together with proteins and carbs after workout, there's a study that did show that there is an increase in mTOR activation, specifically leucine-mediated mTOR activation. So granted, your protein should have leucine in there, and with the presence of leucine, glucose, obviously you need to upregulate insulin for anabolism, and then you have ketones, and that increases mTOR activation for protein synthesis. So that would be very good for recovery. And then another point is the signaling effect. So ketones, I think one of the hottest topic in metabolism research these days is metabolites as signaling molecule, because we are starting to learn that, okay, glucose is not just a source of fuel. It also signals certain things. Same thing with ketones. Ketones have been shown to go into the nucleus and bind to histones on the DNA itself and really regulate translation and transcription. So that on a fundamental level is so powerful, because now we are talking about gene altering effects of a substrate that can be used for energy.
And they're HDAC. These are inhibitors, right?
HDAC inhibitors,
yes. Acetylase inhibitors.
Yeah.
And when we talk about HDACs or these inhibitors, like the ketones, their ability to, as you said, get into the nucleus, bind to histones, et cetera, are we now activating some of these longevity pathways that we see, like these FOXO pathways that we see in centenarians and super centenarians? They seem to have like FOXO3 and I forget the other ones, but these generally the FOXO pathways that are related to a longer life.
Possibly, it is very possible to turn on those genes, but whether it is the ketones that's doing that, or is it the calorie restriction that's doing that, or is something else that's doing that, we still don't know. And it's like, how long do you need to go on keto to do that? Do you have to be in for a lifelong sort of, committed? I always believe that there is no one diet that fits all. And you shouldn't be on one diet for an extended period of time, like for years and years, because your body adapts to it. And that's the thing with our body. It's so smart and we should be thankful for it. But sometimes it's too smart for our own good because it adapts and it compensates and it just chooses to be lazy. And because it's the most efficient path of least resistance, it always chooses that, right? So we need to always trick our bodies to do something different and change our patterns so that it creates some form of stress and then induce hormesis.
I'm so happy you said that. I talk about this all the time because we talk in my first book, The Betty Body, we talked about cyclical keto, like a sort of therapeutic intervention of ketosis and then cyclical. And then, I always say that the diet that heals you is not the diet that you follow forever. And sometimes we get, especially with the ketogenic diet, and I see this with women where we restrict carbohydrates, let's say, and they get the weight loss that they're looking for and the body composition changes that they're looking for and the glucose and the insulin sensitivity, all that's upregulated, everyone's happy. And then they stay on it for 4 years. And then they wonder why they're regaining the weight and their thyroid isn't working anymore because now we have no conversion of T4 to 3 because their insulin levels they actually become more insulin resistant over time when you don't actually have any carbohydrates. So I just love what you're saying. I think that when we're thinking about therapeutic interventions like a ketogenic diet, it's like there's a time and place for it. And the nice thing that we have now is something like an exogenous ketone supplement that doesn't taste like battery acid anymore, where you can take it whether you are a sugar burner, glycolytic, fat burner, ketogenic, lipolytic, et cetera. So I think that, so we can use supplements like, ketones, as we're talking about, to supplement whatever diet you choose. And we can also have some carbohydrates so that our thyroids are happy, because that seems to be, and I've had Dom D'Agostino is a friend of mine. He's been on the show, love him and his wife. And one of the things that we talked about when he was on the show, he and I sort of had we had the same observation sort of independently, is when women are on a ketogenic diet for too long, like they sort of ride the area of the area under the curve for too long, then we start to see the thyroid sort of going kaput. And so I've sort of noticed just clinically around 40% for women, they need about 40% of their calories coming from protein. And then sort of whatever else you like, like you like more fat, you can kind of do the more fat thing. You like more carbs, like you can do the more carb thing. But there's a therapeutic intervention. There's a time and a place for that. And then you sort of come out of that and say, okay, I've healed my insert whatever, why you started the ketogenic diet in the first place. And now I can start reintroducing or eating in a slightly different way. Maybe it's eucaloric, right? So we keep the calories the same, but we can sort of change the composition of the diet a little bit.
I think I got goosebumps when you said the diet that heals you is not the diet that you go for. I got goosebumps because it's so true. It is so true. And a big part of it, I sort of learned it the hard way because I grew up overweight until I was 22. I lost about 45 pounds and started exercising. Only then I started exercising at the age of 22. I did not like exercise when I was young. And I was on the low calorie, low carb diet for, 7 years or longer. And to a point where, okay, I'm in the normal weight, but I also have very high body fat percentage. And no matter what I do, no matter how little I eat, it will go down for a bit, it will dip, and then it will still go back up. And I'll end up injuring myself because I'm not recovering enough because of the low calorie. So then my trainer and I started carb cycling because just to retrain my body to be able to use carbs, to be able to be insulin sensitive. And then I lost 15 pounds and the weight has been off. Great? But now I'm plateauing. So now he's increasing carbs again because the lower in carb is not losing any weight anymore. So we'll see what happens in the next few weeks. But most importantly, I think even though, ketones are so wonderful and it does a lot of things, it's not a miracle drug. It's not a miracle molecule, right? I tell people all the time, it's not going to solve all your problems. It's a tool, a very useful tool, like you said, to augment whatever lifestyle that you're in order to get that productivity, get that cognitive benefit, get that physical performance on top of whatever you're doing, right? If you are doing keto, great. If you're not doing keto, if you just, being active, like if you don't feel like, being active, you're tired, you fatigue, you're not motivated, having that helps me. Like having a shot, okay, now I'm like at the end of my day, I'm tired with work, but now I have this shot. Now I feel energetic. Let's knock this workout out, right? So even though we are selling ketones, I would never demonize glucose. Glucose is not inherently bad. Our body needs glucose.
Agreed.
Because even
Agreed.
if you do not eat any glucose, you measure your blood glucose level, it's at baseline. You'll still have at least 4 millimolar. Why? Because your body needs it, right? It's the overeating of glucose that is bad for you. It is the abundance of glucose, of refined sugar, of processed foods that in combination leads to an excess in calories that is bad for you. So glucose in and of itself is not bad.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's the molecule of life.